The Phantom Hitchhiker of Route 66. Route 66, once the main artery of America, had long since fallen into disrepair. It was now a desolate stretch of road, with abandoned gas stations and ghost towns scattered along its length. Despite its eerie atmosphere, it still drew the occasional traveler, intrigued by its history and the legends that surrounded it. One such traveler was Alex, a young man on a cross-country road trip. He had always been fascinated by the supernatural, and the stories of haunted places along Route 66 intrigued him. He had spent the day exploring an old, abandoned diner and was now driving through the night, hoping to reach the next town before his gas ran out. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, Alex felt a growing sense of unease. The road ahead seemed to stretch on endlessly, and the only light came from his headlights cutting through the darkness. He turned up the radio to drown out his thoughts, but the static only added to the unsettling atmosphere. Suddenly, he saw a figure standing by the side of the road, illuminated by his headlights. It was a woman, dressed in a simple white dress, her long hair cascading over her shoulders. She had one arm raised, her thumb extended in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker. Alex slowed down, his curiosity piqued. As he pulled over, the woman approached the car with a serene expression. She opened the passenger door and slid in, her movements graceful and almost otherworldly. "Thank you for stopping," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "I need to get to the next town. Can you take me there?" Alex nodded, unable to take his eyes off her. There was something ethereal about her, something that made his skin prickle, but he couldn't turn her away. He had always been a sucker for a damsel in distress. "I'm Alex," he said, trying to break the tension. "What's your name?" "Lila," she replied, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I appreciate your help, Alex. Not many people stop for strangers these days." As they drove, Alex tried to make conversation, but Lila's answers were brief and vague. She seemed lost in her own thoughts, her gaze distant. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling him. After a while, they reached a small, run-down motel on the outskirts of a ghost town. Lila pointed it out, and Alex pulled into the gravel parking lot. "This is it," she said, turning to him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for the ride, Alex." Before he could respond, she leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. Her lips were cold, sending a shiver down his spine. Then she was gone, disappearing into the night without a backward glance. Alex watched her go, a strange sense of loss washing over him. He sat in the car for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Finally, he decided to check into the motel and get some rest. He could think about it in the morning. The motel was as run down inside as it was outside. The clerk, an old man with a weathered face, eyed Alex suspiciously as he paid for a room. "Not many folks pass through here," the clerk said, handing him a key. "What brings you to these parts?" "Just passing through," Alex replied, forcing a smile. "Picked up a hitchhiker a few miles back. Dropped her off here." The old man's eyes narrowed. "A hitchhiker, you say? Was she a young woman, dressed in white?" Alex nodded, a sense of unease creeping back. "Yeah, that's her." "Why?" The clerk leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Son, you just met the Phantom Hitchhiker. She's been dead for over 50 years. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. That can't be. I just saw her. She was in my car. The clerk shook his head. Many folks have seen her. She appears, asking for a ride to the next town. But once she reaches her destination, she disappears. They say she died in a car accident on Route 66, and her spirit's been wandering ever since, looking for someone to take her home. Alex felt a wave of disbelief and dread wash over him. He thanked the clerk and hurried to his room, his mind racing. He tried to sleep, but his dreams were filled with visions of Lila, her cold kiss lingering on his cheek. The next morning, Alex decided to investigate. He drove back to the spot where he had picked up Lila, hoping to find some clue to explain what had happened. As he walked along the roadside, he spotted a small, weathered cross partially hidden by tall grass. It marked the site of a fatal car accident. His heart pounded as he knelt down to examine it. The inscription read, Lila Anderson, 1935 to 1954. Forever in our hearts. Alex felt a cold hand on his shoulder and spun around, but there was no one there. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a faint, melodic voice. Thank you, Alex, it seemed to say. I can rest now. Trembling, Alex returned to his car and drove away, vowing never to speak of his encounter with the Phantom Hitchhiker. He continued his journey along Route 66, but the memory of Lila haunted him, a reminder that some spirits never truly leave the road. Years later, Alex shared his story with his own children, warning them about the dangers of picking up hitchhikers. And though they laughed it off as just another ghost story, Alex knew the truth. The Phantom Hitchhiker was real, and she would always be waiting for her next ride on the lonely stretch of Route 66.